My name is Bill Crismon. I am 72 years old. I live in Little Rock, Arkansas. I live alone. I am retired for several years. We got one son, a daughter-in-law, and 3 grandchildren, all who live close by. So that's really nice. Good support group. My leisure time is spent mostly outdoors. I enjoy everything outdoors, kayaking and fishing and hiking and gardening and taking care of my yard. So those are the things that bring me joy, that and my grandkids. I was diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer in 2010, so 14 years ago. My cancer actually originated at the junction of the esophagus and the stomach. So it was an EG junction. And at the time of diagnosis, I had a lot of tumor, both at the primary site, known lymph node involvement, and known liver involvement. Again, that was in 2010. Before I was diagnosed, living the good life. I was 58 years old, had been married for 38 years to my lovely wife. Our son was grown and out of college and pretty much on his own. I was working at a job that I really, really enjoyed, working in a medical field. My degree was in medical technology. So I wouldn't say I was on cruise control at age 58, but retirement was at least in the future for me. Enjoyed the same things that I enjoy now, the outdoor activities, hiking and camping and those kind of activities. So life was good, and we were kind of on cruise control, headed for retirement and enjoying our retirement years. Very typically of stomach cancer patients, I had almost no symptoms. I had actually worked in an oncology clinic for several years, so I was pretty familiar with signs and symptoms. Even so, my only symptom really was vague fullness sometimes after eating, and I had lost about 10 or 12 pounds. And as a 58-year-old person, you don't lose weight unless you're really trying. So I had an inkling that something was wrong. But again, like most stomach cancer patients, nothing dramatic. I went in to saw a gastroenterologist because of the fullness, which led to an EGD, which led to my diagnosis. Met with the gastroenterologist a couple of days later, my wife and I. And again, I had a good concept of what was going on. But when he said the words, when my wife and I met with the gastroenterologist, he told me, it was an adenocarcinoma. I did have liver involvement, and that my life expectancy could be measured in months at that point. So we managed to get out of the office to the car without speaking, actually, or crying. Got in the car, and my very first words were, I never even made it to Alaska, which had been on my bucket list forever. And that story is going to come back a little bit later as we continue to talk about my cancer journey. My response was tempered by my experience in oncology. I knew from my experience that what that gastroenterologist had told us was probably very accurate, that, not very many people survive stage 4 stomach cancer very long. The 5-year survival, stage 4, when I was diagnosed in 2010, was only 2%. That's improved a little bit. It's up to 3 or 4% now, but it's still pretty much a death sentence at that point. So I was, resigned that was going to be true. I actually made funeral arrangements, but I made myself a list of rules. One of those rules was, if the battle can be won, I'll fight tooth and nail. But if the war is lost, then I reserve the right to surrender dignity. So I kind of kept that juxtaposition in mind. I'm going to fight with everything I've got, but I'm going to reserve the right that if it goes like it normally goes, that at some point I'm going to stop and say enough's enough. I'm going to talk about, I'll just go down the list of the rules now that I got them right. First was I wanted quantity or quality over quantity. Second, that I wanted dignity. So if the battle could be won, I'll fight tooth and nail. If the war was lost, I wanted to surrender with dignity. Number 3 was I would not tolerate pity. I would not pity myself, and I didn't want the pity of others. Number 4 is if this was going to be my cross to bear, that I wanted to behave as my mother had behaved during her treatment. And the 5th rule was that I would be open with my wife, Martha, so that she didn't have to bear anything alone. And we kept that promise to each other. I and everyone in my background wanted me to get started as soon as possible. I felt it was important to get multiple opinions. And so I actually got 3 medical opinions, 3 different institutions. And they all 3 told me the same thing. So I elected to be treated at the clinic where I knew the docs and knew a lot of the nurses and staff, so I felt comfortable there. I first started with chemotherapy with a platinum derivative and infusional 5-FU that I took 5 days in a row. Those cycles were repeated every 3 weeks. As I mentioned earlier, I did have significant bleeding following the biopsies to the extent that I was getting transfused every 3 or 4 days. So I knew an interventional radiologist from church, and he got involved in my care and did some interesting things. The first of which was embolizing the stomach, the artery that led to the tumor. So that was very successful in stopping bleeding. And then he also did a chemo embolization of the liver lesions. So injected beads in, reduced the blood supply to the tumor there in the liver, as well as laid in behind those chemotherapy beads. Again, that was successful. So after 6 cycles of the chemotherapy and those embolizations, my oncologist, who I love to death, the radiologist, somehow convinced the local surgeon to operate. So in January of 2011, I had what's called an Ivor-Lewis procedure, took out the top half of my esophagus, the top or the bottom half of my esophagus, top half of my stomach, attached those 2 organs back together, took 25 lymph nodes, most of which were mild cancer, and took out the known cancer in the liver. Big procedure, kind of a complicated recovery, but started back on chemotherapy within 2 weeks of that procedure, kept on chemo for another 4 cycles, and then we found that the cancer had recurred in the liver, right one of the margins. So got the surgeon back involved. He went in at that point and did a total left hepatectomy, took the left lobe of my liver completely out, and my gallbladder and a few other things that were in the way there. Went back on chemotherapy, this time with a new drug, which started a drug called Taxotere that I took 4 cycles of, but it just really affected my bone marrow. My blood counts went to 0 and had infections. Stopped that. And about that same time, I was found to have blood clot in my lung, as well as my leg, multiple clots in my lung. Treated that and follow-up x-ray to see if that was gone, and it was. Unfortunately, revealed cancer in my lungs, 2 lesions in my left lung and 1 in my right. So that was, about a year and a half into it, kind of a low point, honestly. I thought, we're not getting anywhere. But this interventional radiologist said he got one more trick up his sleeve and did a procedure called electroporation, where he, it's complicated technologically, but he did that procedure. Again, had complications from that, but those lung lesions just melted away. So I was fortunate in that my tumor was HER2 positive, which allowed the oncologist to add a drug called Herceptin. I continued on that alone after the lung lesions. And at a year and a half after those lung lesions were treated, I had no evidence of cancer. But we continued on the Herceptin, feeling like we had to do something, anything. And at 2 years, my scans were good. And at 3 years, my scans were good. And we just kept going. I actually took Herceptin by infusion once every 3 weeks for 9 years. But I am now 14 years out. I've been cancer-free ever since that first year and a half. So pretty remarkable super survivor type story. My lowest point in the whole journey, I had developed a myeloma as a result of my gallbladder being out. A bile had accumulated and got infected, and it was a mess. So they had actually put a drain in with an external to that. External to me was this big contraption, metal contraption, to keep everything flowing out. It was just before I was diagnosed with the lung metastases. I was tired. I was beat up. I'd been in and out of the hospital for 15 months. And I was laying there one night. It was about 10 o'clock with that contraption hanging out of me in the hospital alone. And I had decided that day I had decided that I'd had enough. That I was chasing a dream that wasn't going to happen. I was doing nothing but bringing pain to myself and my family, financially, emotionally, and it was just enough. It was time to quit. So I had made that decision and was comfortable with that decision. But lonely, living, laying there in the hospital room by yourself. And in walks that radiologist friend. And he sits and we talk and, chit chat about one thing and another. And as he gets up to leave, and I did not relate to him about my decision to stop there. But as he got up to leave, he turned back and he said, there's not much quit. So he turned back and said, I guess there's just not much quit in you. And that actually changed, it changed my mind. I said, okay, well, if he believes in me, then I ought to believe in myself. So we soldiered on from there. Sure enough, within 2 weeks, we found the lung metastases, and I was ready to quit again, and he wouldn't let me. So he was very influential, very important in my care. But that was a definite low point and a turning point. If I had followed my desires and quit when the lung metastases came along, I'm sure I would have said enough's enough. But turned out differently. And here I am. The things that supported me, number one was my wife, who was just marvelous. She actually quit working and decided, this is my new job, taking care of me. And it was a big full-time job for that first year or two. Of course, I had to pour it in, and I was either on chemotherapy or on antibiotics or IV fluids or getting blood. I had a feeding tube for months that she managed. And we managed a lot of that at home. She learned to be a pretty good nurse, changing IV tubing and bags and giving me my feedings through the tube. And it's just, without her, I'm sure I couldn't survive. I'm a man of faith, have a strong background of faith. I did lean on that a lot during the process. I prayed a lot, had a lot of people prayed for me. My prayers were always that God's will be done. I never prayed for a cure. I didn't see that as being fair. Save me and don't save somebody else. But I did ask for God's will to be done. And I think that maybe it was, and now it's my obligation to pay that back. And I do that in any way that I can. So I actually, the good things, some of the good things that came out, and good things did come out. I've been able to help other people see cancer and the cancer journey in a whole different way. And I advocate for cancer research, help newly diagnosed patients, volunteer at cancer institutes, participate in cancer walks and fundraising. I do what I can because I think that must be the reason I was saved, was to help other folks. A highlight of my survival was, as I mentioned earlier, when I first got diagnosed, and my first thought was I never made it to Alaska. On the 5-year anniversary of being diagnosed, I and my brother and two of my best friends went to Alaska. Floated spectacular rivers and saw the beauty that is Alaska. Took a float plane into a little remote lake and did some fishing. It was a fabulous trip. That was kind of, I guess, a reward for that 5 years of survival. So that was, definitely a high there. Another, I got to see the birth of 1, 2, and 3 grandchildren in that time period. So the first little one came along. She's now 11. So, it's 3 years into my journey when my first one appeared. And our bond is strong as ever. Love them all to death. Life did change after diagnosis. First couple of years, obviously, were just overwhelmingly consumed by the treatment. But as the years went by, one big difference was that I could no longer work. I mean, I'm a working guy. I love working. At age 58, I wasn't ready to quit. But I had to. I couldn't do what I had done before. Physically, I couldn't do much, hardly anything initially. So adapting to a life of retirement before I was really ready was a challenge for me. Again, I relied on my wife, and we stayed together and busy a lot. I've since gone back to work part-time. I've got multiple little part-time jobs, and I do a lot of volunteer work. As far as my values, I was diagnosed with heart disease. Actually had an MI at age 42. So I was already a little bit attuned to the fact that you better live one day at a time. Because you never know what might happen next. So I was already kind of not, you can't honestly ever live like today's your last day, because tomorrow often comes. But I tried to be careful and cognizant about what the way I was living my life. And as I mentioned earlier, the real change for me now is giving back. And being of service to other people. That's my focus now. I enjoy that. It rewards me, and it seems like it's the purpose in my life is to be of service to others, not just in the oncology community, although that is my focus. But as an example, I got involved this spring. There's a camp here in Little Rock that serves kids with disabilities. So they have a full camp that they try to make this camp as inclusive as any kid going to summer camp. So there's archery and there's swimming and there's canoeing, and all of these kids are with. There'll be a week's camp for cancer, kids with cancer. There's a camp for kids with spina bifida. There's a camp for kids with diabetes. 7 weeks, each with a different diagnosis. They wanted to have a garden that the kids could enjoy. So I and a couple of friends built handicapped accessible raised bed gardens that was incorporated into the camp life, so kids could see, where some of their food is coming from, what a garden looks like. Activities such as that, I love. Off the record, I think I included a picture or two of my garden. It's really pretty. I guess that's all I got for you. For people who are just diagnosed, it's shocking and terrifying. I would actually have 2 pieces of advice. One is very common: get the second opinion. And especially if you have an unusual cancer, if you can get to a larger center that has expertise in that area. I sought 3 different opinions. And again, I got the same answer all 3 times, but that's okay. There wasn't any magic bullet, but it's important to do that. And I guess the other thing that I would advise somebody is to not shut down emotionally. I kind of did that. Second piece of advice is to be open with other people. I was open with my wife, and we discussed everything, and my son. But a lot of friends and family, I was not as open as I should have been, could have been. So let them in. People that want to help, even though it's uncomfortable at the time, maybe. They're trying to help you, and the way you can help them is allowing them to help you. So I didn't do that as much as I should, and I would recommend that everybody else do that if you can. My advice to myself would be to try not to panic and to make snap decisions. It's easy to go into a panic mode and just take the first thing that's offered. It's also important, and I wish I'd have been better at this, about taking the advice of other patients who are sitting beside you in the chemo chair. They've all got an opinion of, well, if you just keep your urine, at a pH or whatever, you're going to be cured. If you eat enough grapefruit, you're going to be cured. To be very, honestly, I chased some of those theories early on, and even with my background in being in the medical field and working in oncology, you panic and you reach out for any straw. So I wasted some time and energy doing those things, and I think a lot of other people did as well.